Tonight, the United States divided. Americans tell us race relations have worsened sharply since the election of the first black president. Jim Axelrod on our new CBS News poll. And we'll talk to some of the people on the front line. Tell me why a perfectly law-abiding and reasonable African-American man feels a chill when he encounters a white police officer. One side of the nation digs out of a nor'easter while the other prepares for one of the biggest storms in years. Reports from Vanita Nair and Bagad Shaban. And a sailor lost at sea with a desperate cry for help.
Mayday here, Mayday, this is Malia. Anybody picking this up?
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. The killing of unarmed black men by white police officers helped expose again the racial divide in this country. Well, tonight, a new CBS News poll shows just how deep it is. Have a look. Back in 2009, after Barack Obama was inaugurated, 66% of Americans said race relations were good. Now it's 45%, a drop of 21 points and the lowest in 17 years. And Jim Axelrod is here with more of the story that the numbers tell. Jim?
Scott, our CBS News poll gives us a window into a nation divided along racial lines. 74% of blacks we asked believe police resort to deadly force too quickly, compared to just 28% of whites. 84% of blacks say police are more likely to use deadly force against a black person, and no blacks, 0%, believe police are most likely to use deadly force against whites. Just 10% said race had nothing to do with the decision at all. Compare that to how whites feel. A third said police are more likely to use deadly force against a black person, but well more than half, 57%, said race isn't a factor at all. The divide becomes wider when we ask specifically about the Michael Brown case in Ferguson and the deadly arrest of Eric Garner in New York. More than half of whites were pleased or satisfied by the grand jury decision in Missouri, while 82% of blacks were disappointed or angry.
Shut it down!
87% of blacks were disappointed or angry by the grand jury's decision not to indict in the Garner case. But look at the difference between the two cases for whites. Just 27% were pleased or satisfied with the Staten Island decision. That is 24 points lower than the 51% of whites who were pleased or satisfied with the Ferguson case.
And Jim, there's something very interesting in the poll about how blacks and whites feel about their local cops.
That's right, Scott, that 80% of whites say police make them feel mostly safe. That number for blacks is 52%, and 43% of blacks say the presence of police in their community make them feel mostly anxious. So there is a lot of work to be done, Scott.
Jim, thanks very much. Some of that work falls to America's mayors, and we talked to four of them. Karen Freeman Wilson of Gary, Indiana, Carlos Jimenez of Miami-Dade, Florida, Ed Murray of Seattle, and Lester Taylor of East Orange, New Jersey. Tell me why a perfectly law-abiding and reasonable African-American man feels a chill when he encounters a white police officer. Why does that happen?
Look at the experiences of a 40-year-old African-American man, whether I'm wearing a suit, whether I'm wearing my Timberland boots. There's a perception in many of our communities across the country that African-Americans may be criminals. And that's something that we have to dispel across racial lines.
Let me ask you this question. These altercations with police officers that have caused this national debate, how much of this is a lack of respect for the police?
I think you have to look at not just an alleged lack of respect for police, but again, a lack of sensitivity of law enforcement with the community they serve.
I think it's too easy to say it's the fault of the police officers. I actually think it's a fault of systems and leaders who are not addressing issues and who are not sending a clear message about what is acceptable, what you can and you can't do out there.
Mayor Freeman Wilson?
I think you have to look also at the history. Certainly, there can be environments that can be created that would foster better relationships, but you have to have an understanding of the sense of hopelessness that exists in many communities where they believe that the police may be picking on them, that there may be a disconnect really in understanding. And that's what we need to improve in terms of police and community relations.
Mayor Jimenez, Miami probably has the most diverse population represented in our panel. How do you teach respect for other cultures in the police department?
Well, training, obviously, is a major component of it. In Miami, the minority is the majority, and we're a majority Hispanic community. And so when you're dealing with somebody who is not of your same race, you have to know that their experiences are different than yours. And then that is what creates, a sense of understanding, a sense of belonging, in our community.
When the protests first began in Ferguson, what you heard chanted on the street was "no jobs, no peace." That's what the issue was.
Precisely is.
So to what extent are the economies of your city?
In Seattle, a very affluent city, but 54% of African American children live in poverty. 54% compared to 5% of Caucasian children. That's huge. That kind of disconnect is where this anger is coming from.
Mayor Freeman Wilson, I think you're loaded for bear on this one. Go ahead.
If we're going to address this, because I think that the lesson has to be, what is our solution? We've got to deal with the disparities in education. We've got to deal with the poverty rates in our cities. We have to be willing to cut to the core of some deep-seated, long-standing issues if we are really going to prevent the next Ferguson throughout the country.
We have more of this interview with the mayors on our website, cbsnews.com. And tomorrow night, right here, we will continue the conversation on race with 4 big city chiefs of police. But right now, there is extreme weather in the east and the west. A nor'easter is bringing snow, heavy rain, and high winds to New England and upstate New York. And what's called a pineapple express from the warm waters of Hawaii is threatening the west coast with one of the worst storms in years. We have 2 reports. First, Vanita Nair.
Good evening, Scott. Well, as you can see, the snow is falling here in New York. It's been falling throughout much of the day. The good news is that it is not sticking here in the city, but it is causing a lot of headaches across the Northeast. In Vermont, crews are struggling to restore power to more than 15,000 people. They're dealing with snow buildup and ice that's bringing down power lines and snapping tree limbs. Major interstates like I-81 just outside of Syracuse were at a standstill. Cars that could move were struggling. While central New York got the most snow today with 15 inches, other states across the region are still cleaning up from Tuesday's storm. Over the last 2 days, more than 5,000 flights were delayed and 1,300 canceled.
I'm Begad Shaban in California, where families are preparing for up to 8 inches of rain and near hurricane-force winds. In San Francisco, rocks were cleared because of a concern for mudslides. Schools will also close there. Michelle Mead is a warning coordinator with the National Weather Service.
It's going to be a wind punch, then a rain punch.
Reservoirs dramatically down from a 3-year drought could rise by 2%.
So in the whole scheme of things, this isn't doing a whole lot.
No, it's a little drop. In the drought capacity, it's a pretty small drop.
Nearby creeks that flow into the Sacramento River here are already swollen because of a storm last week. The fear now is that the river could overtop its banks as those creeks continue to spill in. Scott, that means flooding could come as early as tomorrow.
Begad, thanks very much. Stormy on Wall Street. Stock prices fell sharply today. Energy companies led the way. The Dow plunged 268 points. And here's why. Oil hit a new 5-year low, about $61 a barrel. Today, the airline industry says it expects to pass the fuel savings along with a 5% cut in ticket prices next year. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has weighed in on the Senate report that was so critical of the harsh interrogation of terror suspects during the Bush-Cheney administration. Cheney today called the report, quote, a bunch of hooey. The interrogation program was crafted and largely run by 2 former Air Force psychologists. The report calls them Swigert and Dunbar. They were paid $81 million. And Nancy Cordes spoke with one of them today.
Dr. James Mitchell lives outside Tampa. He can't confirm he's the psychologist at the heart of the report, but others have. We reached him by phone.
Did you read the report?
I've read big portions of the report.
What do you think of it?
I think that it's not balanced.
Mitchell spent most of his career teaching servicemen how to endure enemy interrogations. But according to the report, he and his partner, Dr. Bruce Jessen, had never participated in a real-world interrogation before they devised the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques after 9/11. Senate Intelligence Chair Dianne Feinstein.
They did things which I really consider immoral and illegal.
According to the report, the pair proposed and employed 12 tactics, including use of diapers, waterboarding, and mock burials.
What do you think of some of the tactics listed in the report, like using insects in confined spaces?
I think there should be an open and honest discussion in the American public, and people can make up their own minds. What I think about them is irrelevant.
One of the things that a number of your critics have said long before this report came out is that you had no background in interrogation and no background in dealing with al-Qaeda.
You know, I'm not even going to address that. It's a stupid statement. It's just demonstrably false.
Mitchell says he'd like to defend himself more fully on that front, but he can't because he signed a non-disclosure agreement with the U.S. government. He says in the 6 years that the Intelligence Committee spent working on this report, no one from the committee ever contacted him.
Nancy, thank you. There was swift reaction to the Senate report from Muslim extremists, and Holly Williams has that.
One of the most potent symbols of America's war on terror is the orange jumpsuit. ISIS has paraded its captives in the same uniform worn by the prisoners of Guantanamo Bay, and they've used the CIA's interrogation program as a recruitment tool, portraying the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan as a war against Islam. The Senate report has sparked fresh calls for retribution by online jihadist groups and their supporters. Real torture is in hell, tweeted this man who appears to be fighting in Syria. Disbelievers, your turn soon. ISIS already claims to be using waterboarding on its Western captives. This propaganda video, narrated by British prisoner John Cantley, was released in October.
Some of us who tried to escape were waterboarded by our captors, as Muslim prisoners are waterboarded by their American captors.
So far, there's been no official response to the Senate report from either al-Qaeda or ISIS. But a Taliban spokesman in Afghanistan told us the group plans to retaliate by intensifying its attacks against Americans.
There's also anger in those countries where the CIA carried out secret interrogations at so-called black sites. The former president of Poland was forced to admit today that he gave the US access to a facility in his country, despite previously denying it. But Scott, he claims he had no idea there was any mistreatment taking place.
Holly Williams reporting for us from Istanbul tonight. Holly, thank you. There's an important development in that alleged gang rape at the University of Virginia. And lost and found. We'll have a sailor's tale of survival when the CBS Evening News continues. Tonight, we have an important development in that alleged gang rape at the University of Virginia fraternity party. Rolling Stone magazine first reported the story last month. The school after that shut down all Greek activities and launched an investigation. But the magazine later backpedaled when questions were raised about the alleged victim, identified only as Jackie. Well, now, Juliana Goldman has spoken with a friend of Jackie. He was also in the article and remembers events very differently.
When the Rolling Stone article first went up, Alex, who is a third year at UVA, said he started to read the piece, not knowing he would be a central figure.
Slowly dawned on me that this was, in fact, the story that Jackie, similar to the story Jackie had told me in some ways.
Alex, who asked we only use his first name, realized he was in the article identified as Andy, a friend of Jackie's who met her after an alleged sexual assault at a UVA fraternity house in 2012. In the article, Jackie is portrayed as coming to 3 of her friends with obvious injuries. The friends discourage her from coming forward out of fear it might damage their social standing.
I don't recall her being visibly injured. No, I mean, maybe did she have some minor cuts or scrapes? I don't remember, but the sort of the bloodbath that was depicted, crashing through a glass table. I don't recall that.
He says the worst part of the article was how it portrayed the friend's response.
The rape itself was obviously terrible, but then the response was the friends don't care, the administration doesn't care, nobody cares. It's, and I think that depiction is just false.
We spoke with the other male friend who was mentioned in the article, and Scott, he independently corroborated Alex's account. Both men say they have never been contacted by Rolling Stone and that they're cooperating with the Charlottesville police investigation into what happened that night.
Juliana Goldman breaking the story in Charlottesville tonight. Juliana, thank you, and there'll be more about this on CBS This Morning tomorrow. The NFL is toughening its policy on personal conduct, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. Today, NFL owners unanimously approved a tougher policy on personal conduct. Commissioner Roger Goodell has faced criticism over the way he's handled domestic violence cases, and last month an arbitrator overturned his indefinite suspension of Ray Rice. Under this new policy, a special investigator will oversee initial discipline, but Goodell will still have the final word on appeals. A sailor who'd been missing since Thanksgiving is back on dry land tonight. 67-year-old Ron Ingram was rescued at sea more than 60 miles south of Honolulu. Ingram first radioed for help on November 27th, saying his 25-foot boat, the Malia, was taking on water off Hawaii's Big Island. The Coast Guard and Navy searched for 4 days before giving up. Then, yesterday,
Mayday here, Mayday, this is the Malia. Anybody picking this up?
an 8-second distress call saved Ingram's life. A Navy destroyer 14 miles away picked him up. About that 12-day gap between the 2 Mayday calls, Ingram says a wave took out his radio antenna, but he was later able to make one.
I got a coat hanger and some wire, stuck it in the thing, and got off a garbled transmission. But it was all about these guys. They're real life heroes.
The Coast Guard and the Weather Service told us today that Ingram's account of rough seas checks out. His friends had been planning a memorial service this weekend, but now it's being turned into a celebration. Is there hope for improving relations between the races? We'll hear from some inner-city kids next. We began tonight with the declining state of race relations, and we'll end with perhaps the greatest hope for improving them, the young generation. We wanted to know what they're thinking, so we asked Eureka Duncan to find out.
For the last few weeks, seniors at the Brooklyn School for Collaborative Studies have been speaking openly about the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner. 17-year-old Jordan Ballard.
They didn't even think that it was worth going to trial and asking a few more questions. That's the problem with our society today.
16-year-old Alexis Lopez did not think the violent protesters in Ferguson were wrong.
Yes, they destroyed property, but they didn't end nobody's life. They turned over a cop car to make a point.
Fellow student Enrique Boone disagrees.
I believe that it's actually nice to protest, but when you start rioting, to the point where you start looting stores and you start burning down buildings and churches, you're no longer representing your people in a good way.
With the Eric Gardner case, like, I know he died and all, but like, was the cops' intentions like really intentional? Like, was he really meant to kill him?
I mean, he said,
I can't breathe. How many people really get arrested and was on the floor and said, I can't breathe, but then you're not allowed to show people?
How many of you all have had an encounter with the police or been stopped by the police? For what reason?
I was stopped while riding my bike for suspicion.
Normal stop and frisk.
I guess.
Nicole, you've never been stopped and frisked.
I've never been stopped or for like anything, but whenever I do see police officers, I do get intimidated because it happened to like all of them, and it shouldn't be like that. You know, the police are supposed to like enforce the law and protect us.
Do you think things will get better?
Change can definitely happen. I feel like we just need the proper organization and determination to evoke that change. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know that we can get there.
I feel like discussions like this helps us build on each other and helps build character and helps us get ready for the real world.
A world where change starts with words. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, New York.
Part of the national conversation on the CBS Evening News tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.